Trying something different. Pulled out the desk, so I'm sitting a little further away. That way, that might help the sound. Dr. Graybo and I. And I'm learning how to smoke this stuff. Slightly different approaches depending. I have the Amaretto in right now. The Cherry Cavendish requires a slightly different approach. It's very thick. So both of them you got to go a little slow with. But if you treat them friendly, they're very enjoyable to smoke. Amaretto is a little bit more aggressive. If you turn it back on, it'll punch you in the face. I put in the Cherry Cavendish last night and sat down with some music, and it was a joy to smoke it. Smoked it slow. I could feel the smoke coming out of the pipe. Never burned. Never bit. And that's with the Cavendish. The Amaretto, it will bite you. Smoking that now, I think I said. I'm under a ceiling fan that draws the smoke up really quick. That way I get to smell it, but I don't have to get constantly bashed in the face. Nah, it's daytime. Getting the glare, there's no way out of it. If I don't talk, but just smoke, it smokes pretty reliably. May well go out on me. But if I'm just sitting there thinking, there's not a problem in the world with it. Yeah, it went out, but no, it didn't. Get it fired up. Once that ember gets going, it won't fight. Don't want it too hot, of course. It's always the case, but this is not a fight. Not going to read any of it right now. I'm about halfway through. Um, it's interesting. It's in my thinking on Frankenstein, I indicated that science is a crappy guide, and it is. Not because it's complicated, difficult to understand, but because it doesn't reflect on itself. It doesn't. The nature of science is that it wants to be falsifiable. The mistake is to think it wants to be verifiable. It doesn't want to be verifiable. It wants to be falsifiable. So a theory survives because it isn't falsified, not because it isn't verified. The whole point of a scientific experiment is to show the hypothesis is incorrect, and thereby undercutting the theory. So the thing about science is it's not interested in being self-reflective. It just cares whether or not what it thinks is true can survive another set of experiments. And of course, replication is huge, because just because you didn't verify, or rather, just because you failed to falsify a hypothesis with a particular experiment, doesn't mean that you did the experiment well, and that if the experiment is repeated, the hypothesis will not be falsified. So just because it survives falsification once doesn't really amount to a whole lot. Um, it needs to withstand the same attacks over and over again, and then have new attacks launched all the time. And that's how it grows. It's not interested in what you think is the case. It's not interested in your perspective. Uh, Science is only interested in the design of the experiment, the execution of the experiment, and the results of the experiment. So, a hideous guide for anything other than generating knowledge. Uh, Reflectivity has to come from somewhere else. And I pointed out that philosophy, music, art, literature, poetry, none of it is trusted. We've had too long a period of just doing what is human, which is laying your trust uh, in authority. And the scientific authorities have done well in establishing themselves as the go-to group for everything. So we're left kind of bereft. Um, so I've been approaching This Is Not a Pipe from that perspective. Like, is this a guide? Can I interpret this not as an analysis of a painting, Michel Foucault working through the nature of Magritte's painting, but rather, can it tell me something? Can this piece of artwork tell me something about American politics, for example? Nothing more crucial at the moment than that. Uh, all norms under attack. I vote. I participate. Who in God's name will preserve the republic? In my view, not the democracy, but the republic. You know, I want the electoral college. I want the minority to be protected. Uh, right now, uh, the consequence is that the minority has the ultimate political power. And the popular vote didn't put them there, but rather the electoral college. Well, some see that as an argument against the electoral college. I see it as an argument in the failure of the Democratic opponent to assess what was necessary to win the electoral college. And the consequence is 4 years. Always the consequence. In this case, the consequence has led to 2.5 years of tumult and people worrying about institutions. So, can Magritte help us? The obvious intersection for me is the moment that President indicated that what you see and what you hear from the press, particularly CNN, MSNBC, cannot be believed. It's biased. It's fake. There's some reason for it outside of just analysis. The truth is what the source tells you is the truth, not what the analysis tells you is the truth. So now you can ignore everything that comes from uh, an invalid source. And the invalid source is determined by the office of the presidency, not by some adherence to the truth. And here's where science is going to fail, because politicians just walk all over science. So who cares? Uh, what matters is, can I get the votes? Not whether or not what I say is true. So if I tell you we can run a deficit without any negative effect, um, and you buy it, and I can say that in such a way that it cannot be analyzed, and if it is analyzed, you will ignore it anyway, I've won. So how does that work in the sense of changing the guide? The guide no longer being say science, political science, social science. Human beings are squishy. They're predictable in a lot of ways, but they're still squishy. Science gets a little unhappy around squidgy edges like that. Um, so when the statement is made that what the press says is not the truth, that is precisely what is being said by Magritte in the painting, "This is not a pipe." Now, Foucault highlights the fact that it's a convention of language, that the object that is being referenced is what you're talking about. This is a pipe. So language would say, this image, this is a pipe. But this language is saying, this is not a pipe, and yet you're looking at it and it's a pipe. It's causing a problem. It's causing a problem. What do you do with that? How do you go from the language, this is not a pipe, to the image, this is a pipe? How do you sit there all day and look at it, not get anywhere? You could sit there all day and analyze things that are being said, you know, about the Hatch Act, or about the Russians, or about whomever, um, and not get anywhere. You get nowhere. Foucault later points out that what you are seeing, the language, this is not a pipe, is in fact not language. Let that sink in for a second. It's not language. It's a picture. It's not a picture of language. It's a picture of swoopy lines that all are designed intentionally to come together to imply a statement. There are, in effect, there's three paintings. There's the pipe on the easel. There's a there's the pipe, and then there's a painting of cursive, French cursive. Um, and there's all kinds of mistakes that occur when you look at that. It's like, well, which is the pipe? Is there a pipe? There could be. There may not be. It may be an archetype of a pipe. He may not have painted a pipe at all. He may have painted his grandfather's pipe from 50 years ago. It's all an illusion. It's a pipe. And you see this writing, and it's like, wow, he's telling us it's not a pipe. Now, what is he pointing to? According to Foucault, he's not telling you it's not a pipe. The mistake is to think that you're looking at language, a statement of fact. It's not a statement of fact. It's just a aesthetic element to the painting. If you look at classic paintings, if you take a Da Vinci or Rembrandt or any of those, you can find certain classic elements like a triangle. You follow one set of eyes where they're looking. You may pick up another set of eyes looking somewhere else. You follow that, and then whatever it is that's looking there, it will actually guide your eyes back up to where you were starting. Triangles. Literal triangle here. Just run. Once you get down to here, you're in the water. And you look at the water, but if you follow the triangle up, you're in the clouds. But what do you find in the clouds? And you can't make it out. But he put faces. There are faces in the cloud. And if you kind of look at where the face is bringing you back down, the gaze, to the triangle, which can you can run all different ways with that. A perfect example, right over my shoulder, there's a triangle. Classic element. There's basically a triangle in Magritte's painting. You look at the phrase, this is not a pipe, it's at the bottom, and you look at the easel and you're like, okay, well maybe that's a painting of a pipe. That's not a pipe, Then you kind of you're distracted and look up. There's a massive thing, pipe. Like, oh, that's a pipe. No other elements. You drop down, take a second look at the phrase. This is not a pipe, and you just run. You just run in the painting that way. When you stop and you say, okay, that's not language. That's just an image. Now we step out and we look at the politics of it. The point, that's fake news. All them over there, they're fake news. Well, that's not a statement of fact. No one has proven anything about whether or not it's fake or not fake. At times it's mistaken news. Then they have to make a retraction and go from there and suffer some embarrassment. But there's no one has established at any point in the last several years that the news media produces anything other than occasionally a mistake. There's no reason to think it's a fake news. Well, that's because the statement fake news doesn't actually stand for a fact. It's not a fact. Fake news is an image. It wants to create an image. The swamp. The untrustworthy that float around on the swamp. And you can't assume that anything that any of them say has any accuracy whatsoever because they are the swamp things. And for whatever deep-seated reason, they want the negative to stick. Now, of course, someone who disagrees with that would say, well, no, it's fake news. I mean, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. You know, but the interesting thing is that art, through the analysis of Foucault, has given us a way to clear some of the dust. Otherwise, you're just perpetually stuck. You're scratching your head. You have to become an information sump to this place where all the information comes in, and you can suck it out and put it somewhere else so they can be analyzed. No one has time for that. But if we take someone like Magritte seriously, or somebody like Foucault, who becomes the guarantor of analysis, not of the analysis. Um, Art doesn't work that way. Art is interpretive. Philosophy is interpretive. You know, um, just because Leibniz, just because you can show the weakness and you can begin to collapse the argument, and it doesn't matter what it is. That's why I'm not mentioning anything. It's just its name, Leibniz. Or Rene Descartes or Plato or whoever you attack for whatever reason, doesn't mean that there isn't stuff in there that can't be used, can't be useful. But the way you reason that is different. And if you don't practice that reasoning, you're doomed to be in the dark. So that, I think, is the power of the book. The book chips away at our foundations, takes us into a very dark place, kind of drags us. There's the allegory of the cave for Plato, where you're stuck in the cave, and I don't know how the first guy gets out, but somebody gets out and they turn around and they see. The setup is that you're sitting looking at a wall, and behind you is another wall. Behind that is a fire, and people are running puppets and images across that wall with the fire behind it casting shadows on the wall that you are stuck looking at. That's your reality. If somebody breaks you loose, you turn around, you see the fire, you see the images, you see the manipulation of it, and you realize that, hey, there's a deeper reality here. And then you follow the slope up, and you eventually leave the cave. You enter into the sunlight, and now all of a sudden, you see the landscape bathed in the sunlight. You realize that there's even a deeper reality here. No one is carrying that tree around. No one is, holding that deer, so that I can see the reflection of it on the shadow of it on the wall. Um, that process is very difficult to come out of the cave. Magritte is dragging you back in. Magritte's saying, okay, you've got all this sophistication, you've got all these, you've got all this, you've got science everywhere, there's too much. We got a limit. We'll drag you back in to the cave. And then you can take another shot at your foundations. Take another shot at trying to understand the world that you just came from. And science can't do it. Science can't do it for us. Absolutely cannot. You do have to go back to Byron, and you do have to go to Magritte, and you do have to go to Descartes, and any number of other thinkers and artists. Um, and this small book gives a roadmap, gives you tools for being able to do that, and it's very difficult. It's every bit as hard as science. Every bit as hard. Uh, and of course, any one scientific theory, you can change your perspective on it slightly um, in order to question it. And two people looking at this painting, they're not going to come down on exactly the same place that Foucault does. Um, oh, here comes a library cat. Yep. Well, that's the cat butt. Library cat butt. I'm going to finish the book. I think this is the last. This is the last look. Um, I would like to find a pipe that kind of looks like that. That would be a fun. That would be a fun first pipe for the library. I think. I hope that knocking around with the text and thinking about it, I'm learning it. I'm looking at it again at 52. I read this book probably right out of college, I imagine. Um, didn't know didn't know anything about anything. Um, had more facts in my head though. I mean, if you'd have said tautology or syllogism or whatever, I'd have been on solid ground, no problem. But when it comes up in the book, I was, what exactly are we dealing with? So I'm pulling out the Cambridge Dictionary of Philosophy and you know some old logic books and things like that, and feeling kind of desperate. Like, my brain not as nimble as it used to be, and this is too hard. This is hard stuff. But uh, getting beat up by Foucault a little bit, taking Magritte seriously, allowing myself to take art seriously, um, and then intentionally seeing if I can't utilize that to understand the world around me. And I looked at the politics of it because that's the most dramatic. That's the most dramatic thing. I mean, YouTube is full of vitriol. I hate this or I love this and I hate you and I love you, and it's there's a lot of dust. There's a lot of dust. I mean, are these people the sons and daughters of Satan that are occupying the executive branch of the government, or are they just adept at using some tools? You know, I For me the real seed of it is the Senate. The executive branch is so good at kicking up dust, so good at obscuring everything, using language, uh, using imagery created by language. Maybe not using language so much. I mean, as far as I can tell, they're no better at using language than anybody else, and certainly the executive is not eloquent in any way. Um, is effective though, and I think that there are a lot of politicians that are using that dust up as camouflage. And this is where I think news fails. Always talking about this is not normal. This is abnormal. There's something wrong with it. It's not good. It's not right. Um, they're trapped in that. They're following the image where the image is taking them. They're not questioning it. It's not about whether or not it's normal. Um, it's about how much can you accomplish while people are preoccupied with the normal. How much can be blocked in the Senate. Not much can be gotten away with and be reelected. So here's the power. I mean, in two perspectives. From the perspective of just pipes, talking pipes. It's kind of fun. There aren't a lot of heavy philosophical, artistic uses of pipes. Here's one. So it's kind of fun. It has something to say about the world. Uh, in another sense, instead of looking at a modern book, instead of looking at a book that's put out within our own culture, taking a look at how the French were seeing it in the '60s. Foucault stood on rooftops and threw rocks at the police in the '60s. He may have been creating an image too. He knew he wouldn't get in too much trouble. And yet the more he does that, the more Foucault he becomes. So, I'm sure there was legitimacy there, but there may have been some illegitimacy there. They've been playing with the image. So here's a philosopher. Hey, look how dangerous philosophy was in the '60s. Um, anyway, I think it's worth, in terms of markings, which I'm about to launch into. I indicated that it's good to read. It's good to read what your father has read. It's good to read what your mother has read, what your grandmother and grandfather have read. If you can find that out. Uh, but it's also good to think where others have thought. It's not an obvious book. It's obscure. It's obscure. Um, only in the sense of who reads it. This is not a pipe. Too many other books being published. Fight about Wolf's new book. Is it accurate? Is it based on anything? Ain't got time for Foucault, man. You know, Foucault's dead weight. Maybe not. Might be relevant. All right. Well, I'm gonna let that go for now. I'll finish the book. I don't know that I'll come up with any other insights that are worth taking the time for. However, they may tie into something else. Who knows? I'm going to launch into markings next. I think I'm ready to tackle it. All right. Well, I'm going to enjoy my super value tobacco. Took second and third shot at the amaretto and kind of like that, as long as I don't turn my back on it. I do like the cherry Cavendish. And the room note can only be described as sticky. 24 hours after I smoked it downstairs, I can still smell the cherry. Uh, Smells nice enough. I'm a little hinky about that if it's not gonna, if it's gonna stick so strongly. Maybe you should smoke that one more on the porch. All right, well, you guys have a good day or good night or whatever you happen to be faced with. Talk to you again. Bye bye.